Razgovor o ovoj temi nastavljamo sa AFSHINom Shahijem, vanrednim profesorom Keele univerziteta u Londonu, čije studije se fokusiraju na Bliski istok i međunarodne odnose. AFSHIN, welcome to Bloomberg Asia Connect. And for starters, let's look at the current position of Iran. Now it has its reserves of uranium enriched up to 90%. It is now months away from creating a bomb. But at this point, it seems that the U.S. is no longer such a strong player when it comes to bargaining around Iran and its nuclear program.
Good afternoon, Asya. Let me actually put it this way. Right now, as we speak, literally, we are dealing with a ticking bomb scenario. You mentioned enriched uranium of 84% in Iran. But actually, if you do look at the stockpile of the Islamic Republic, the stockpile of enriched uranium of 20% and 60% over the last 3 or 4 years, literally, this stockpile has tripled. The Iranian nuclear infrastructure has been expanding with the speed of light, particularly over the last 3 years. So while Biden has been trying to try its diplomatic solution with the Islamic Republic, the Islamic Republic literally has turned into a threshold nuclear state. So if for Obama, JCPOA was one of the greatest foreign policy achievements of his time, I would say under Biden's watch, Iran is becoming, as I mentioned, a nuclear threshold state, which will have serious consequences and implications, not only for the security of the region, the Middle East, but for the wider global security.
Now, Washington wouldn't go for a new deal that entails anything less than the previous deal, but Iran at this point has no incentives to accept anything like that.
To be honest, even the previous deal in 2023 doesn't make any sense anymore. We shouldn't forget that in 2014, in 2015, one of the greatest objectives of JCPOA was to prevent Iran to reach the existing knowledge to be able to enrich uranium with the purity of, let's say, 80%, 84%. And more importantly, like any international treaty, JCPOA also has a timeline, has a time frame. So most of the articles which were stated in the treaty in 2015, literally, they will expire in a matter of 2 or 3 years. So it is absolutely meaningless to try to revitalize the deal that they reached in 2015. And if you do look at the nuclear developments and the technological developments in Iran over the last 2 or 3 years, unfortunately, the Islamic Republic has passed many of the important red lines. So either the United States and the Islamic Republic has to reach a new deal, which would completely reverse the situation, which, in my opinion, at this stage, is not very likely, or they should declare that JCPOA is completely dead. Biden, in passing, once mentioned that JCPOA is dead, but somehow what we see in Washington is the poverty of imagination, is the poverty of policy ideas, despite the fact that there is a wide consensus.
Yes, and that brings us actually to the next question. Loss of Washington's standing was particularly visible in a Beijing-brokered agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So how do you see this shift playing into 3 things? China's role in the Middle East, relations within the Middle East, because after all, Saudi and Arabia and Iran have been clashing big forces in the region for decades. And finally, what does this do for the trajectory of Iranian politics and economy?
Let me start with your final point. I very much doubted if the new rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia is going to create any important turning point, both in Iranian internal politics and, of course, in Iranian foreign policy. You know, there are a lot of deep and profound disagreements between Iran and Saudi Arabia, although both countries have kind of agreed to reopen their embassies in their capitals, but by no way it means that, you know, they reach an agreement about how to solve their deep problems. And of course, if you know, over the last 6 or 7 months, Iran has been witnessing a lot of governmental protests. The regime is dealing with a very profound crisis of legitimacy. A lot of people in Iran literally are talking about the regime change. So I very much doubt if basically this rapprochement is going to kind of create a new change, a meaningful change in Iran. And of course, in addition to the regional problems that Iran has with countries like Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, there are also wider global problems, like what we were just discussing a few minutes ago, Iranian nuclear program, Iranian missile programs, and of course, the recent Iranian involvement in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I very much doubt if basically this new deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia is going to have any implications or any impact whatsoever on these kind of problematic issues that the Islamic Republic has, both with the regional players as well as the wider global players.
And in conclusion, very shortly, is there any chance for a different deal, or this idea is completely dead and nuclear program is the main bargaining chip for Iran?
As I mentioned, in my opinion, JCPOA is dead, but it seems that kind of the United States doesn't have the willingness to acknowledge it or to try to kind of come up with some alternative policies. Yes, Biden has once mentioned that JCPOA is dead, but he doesn't have plan B, he doesn't have plan C. So effectively, Washington doesn't know right now how to deal with the Iranian nuclear program. And at the same time, over the last 2 or 3 years, the Islamic Republic has been using the umbrella of negotiations with the United States and other EU countries in order to expand its nuclear infrastructure almost beyond recognition. The Iranian nuclear technology has gone now so far, which I very much doubt if basically revitalization of the deal in 2015 or even a new deal which would curb it. So as I mentioned, unfortunately, I would say on the Biden's watch, effectively, the Islamic Republic of Iran has become a threshold nuclear state.
And I guess in a few years, we will have a new nuclear state on the world scene. Thank you very much for speaking to us, AFSHIN.